a disabled female veteran pulls into, a parking spot reserved for heroes like her, but instead of respect, she faces mockery and harsh words from a group of bikers. Their cruelty seems unstoppable, until 30 minutes later, 8 Marines arrive, standing tall and ready to defend her honor. What unfolds next will shock you, a powerful story of sacrifice, courage, and justice. But the real question is, what would you do if you were there?
Welcome to TNM Incredible Story. Let's uncover what really happened.
The afternoon sun poured down like molten gold on the cracked concrete of the Westfield Mall parking lot. It was one of those days where the heat seemed to press against your skin like judgment, hot, heavy, and unrelenting. Sergeant Natalie Rhodes, 48 years old, took a slow, practiced breath as she guided her gray van into the space marked Disabled Veteran. The placard swung gently from her rearview mirror, glinting under the sunlight like a quiet badge of honor. 11 years in the Marine Corps, 3 combat deployments, 1 roadside bomb in Fallujah that cost her left leg. She still remembered the blast like it was yesterday, how the sky turned orange in the air, filled with metal and fire. That memory lived in her bones, not just the titanium rod fused to her femur. With a soft grunt, Natalie turned off the engine and reached for the door handle. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from habit. These public outings still took courage. Grocery shopping shouldn't feel like a battlefield, but for her it always did. She moved carefully. First the cane, then her right leg, and finally the carbon fiber prosthetic that gleamed in the sunlight beneath her shorts. It took her a moment to find balance, a moment too long. Then the laughter came. A group of 5 men stood clustered near their motorcycles, leather vests patched with skulls, flags and false bravado. They looked like they belonged to some loose-knit biker group, self-proclaimed patriots with beer guts and loud mouths. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them called out, his voice thick with sarcasm. "This parking's for real soldiers." Natalie froze. Her fingers tightened around the grip of her cane. Another man chuckled loudly. "Probably married a soldier and took the tag. Happens all the time." A third chimed in, cruelly casual. "My cousin's in the army. He says women never even see combat." A few shoppers nearby slowed their steps. Some looked away awkwardly. A couple smiled at the jokes. But no one said a word in her defense. Natalie didn't answer. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She straightened her back the way she was trained, chin high, eyes forward. Marine posture never dies. She reached into the passenger seat, pulled on her custom gloves, thick enough to protect her palms, but flexible enough for grip, and began walking toward the store. Each step with her cane echoed off the concrete like a heartbeat. Her gait wasn't perfect, but it was powerful. She whispered, mostly to herself, "I didn't survive that war just to explain myself in every damn parking lot." One of the bikers muttered loud enough for her to hear, "Bet she bought that fake leg online. Amazon sells everything these days." Laughter, snickers, camera phones maybe, but still silence from everyone else. Natalie kept walking. Her legs ached. Phantom pain shot through her thigh like fire. But she didn't look back. She had long ago learned that not every battle was worth fighting. As she passed a young man leaning against a pillar near the store entrance, she noticed his hoodie, military gray, the emblem barely visible beneath the folds. He looked up, met her eyes for a second, then turned away, phone in hand. Cowardice, maybe, or maybe just fear. Inside the store, Natalie focused on simple tasks: bread, eggs, coffee, the essentials. Something about the normalcy of shopping steadied her. The clatter of carts, the hum of fluorescent lights. It was almost comforting. Almost. Then came the headaches again. Another leftover gift from Iraq. Mild traumatic brain injury, the doctors called it. She paused in the cereal aisle, leaning heavily on her cane. Memories threatening to drag her under. Smoke, dust, the sound of screaming. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The voice of a young store employee broke through her haze. Natalie forced a smile. One of those everything's fine civilian smiles that veterans perfect over time. "Just a headache," she replied. "It'll pass." And it did, at least for now. 20 minutes later, she exited the store with her bag slung over one shoulder. But the moment she stepped outside, The air thickened again, not from the heat, but from something worse. The bikers were still there, and now they had their phones out. One of them, a man with sleeve tattoos and mirrored sunglasses, held up his phone triumphantly. "Got the perfect shot for the group page," he laughed. "Stolen valor alert. Fake vet taking spots from real heroes." Natalie's stomach twisted. She'd seen those posts before, public shaming. Campaigns by self-appointed warriors of the internet. Photos uploaded, names revealed, insults thrown like grenades. "Just get to the van," she told herself. "Focus on the objective." Like extraction under fire. But before she could reach her vehicle, a security guard intercepted her. Thin, young, and visibly uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said, avoiding her eyes, "we've had a complaint about unauthorized use of the disabled veteran parking." Behind him, the bikers watched with smirks plastered across their faces. The tallest one offered a mocking salute. Natalie didn't flinch. She reached calmly into her wallet and handed over her military ID. The guard frowned. "This says Marine Corps," he mumbled. "But your license plate frame says Army." "It was a gift," Natalie said evenly. "From a friend. I served 11 years in the Marine Corps, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan." The guard still didn't look convinced. "Maybe we should call the VA," he said, "just to verify." Natalie felt her throat tighten. The shame didn't come from the accusation. It came from the crowd, the stares, the way no one stepped in, not even the other veterans if they were there. She'd seen it before, too many times. Behind the SUVs in the corner of the lot, the young man in the grey hoodie was on his phone again. He wasn't laughing. He was speaking quickly, seriously. Then he disappeared. Natalie made it back to her van. Barely. She climbed into the driver's seat, shut the door, and reached into the glove compartment. Inside was a small velvet box. She opened it slowly, revealing the Bronze Star medal. A medal earned in fire and blood and loss. She placed it gently on the passenger seat. Some days, she needed to remember who she really was. Not who they said she was. The rain had started just as Natalie turned onto her street. Big, heavy drops slapped against the windshield, blurring the edges of her world. Wipers hissed back and forth in a slow rhythm, as if even they were tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from just the body, but the soul. The day had taken more out of her than she wanted to admit. She parked in front of her modest house, tucked in a quiet corner of suburban Phoenix. The groceries sat in the passenger seat beside her. A carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, coffee, the one thing she refused to go without. She reached for the bag, then paused. There was a truck parked at the curb. Blue old, plates from out of state. She didn't recognize it. Her grip tightened on the cane as she stepped out into the cold drizzle, eyes fixed on the truck. A strange anxiety knotted in her chest, the kind that came from too many times walking into the unknown with no backup. The door of the truck creaked open. A figure stepped out. Tall, lean, hoodie pulled low, face shadowed. But even in the dim light of dusk, she recognized him. The young man from the parking lot. The one in the grey hoodie who had watched the bikers, then disappeared. He stood for a moment, unsure of himself. Natalie's voice came out sharper than intended. "If you're selling something, I'm not interested." He lifted his head slowly. His eyes met hers, honest, steady. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "I'm not here to sell anything." She didn't relax. "I saw what happened today," he added. "I should have done more." Natalie tilted her head slightly. "You made a phone call?"
I did.
He nodded, stepping forward a few paces, but not too close. "To my old unit, to people who knew you." Her brows furrowed, but she said nothing. He looked down, kicked a pebble on the pavement, then back up. "You saved my life, Sergeant Rhodes. Fallujah, 2007. Silence stretched between them, thick as the humid air. Natalie blinked slowly. She didn't remember his face. There were too many missions, too many nights swallowed by smoke and fire, and the sound of screaming over the comms. But something in his eyes rang true. That silent gratitude, that survivor's guilt. "What's your name?" she asked finally, her voice softer now. "Corporal Elijah Mason," he said. "3rd Battalion, Charlie Company." She looked at him again, really looked. The squared shoulders, the nervous hands, the kind that had held rifles but now shook when they weren't carrying anything. the eyes of someone who had seen too much too young. "I remember the convoy," she said quietly, "but I don't remember you." He nodded. "That's all right. You had other things on your mind that day?" There was a pause. Then gently he added, "But I remember you, clear as day. You dragged me out of that wreck when I couldn't move. My leg was shattered. You came back twice more." Natalie shifted, her fingers tightening on the cane. "I didn't know who you were until today. I saw your name on your license plate, and I called the guys. They told me everything." She nodded slowly, rain trickling down the back of her neck. "And you drove all the way out here just to tell me that?" He smiled, but it was sad. "No, ma'am. I came to say thank you, and to say I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not standing up. Back there, when they mocked you, when you were alone." His voice cracked slightly. "I've worn the same uniform. I've seen what you've seen. And I still—" hesitated. Natalie exhaled, the breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "You didn't hesitate when it counted," she said. "Not really." He looked up, surprised. "You called for backup." Her voice was calm, almost kind. "That's what a Marine does." The rain fell in soft rhythms now, like the world was exhaling with her. "Come inside," she said finally. "You look like hell." He chuckled. "Yes, ma'am." Inside, the living room was small but neat, military neat. A row of medals sat in a glass case on the mantel. But there were also framed photos, smiling faces, a younger Natalie in uniform, standing beside men whose names had long since been etched into stone. They sat on opposite sides of the couch. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was familiar, like the silence after a firefight, when everything hurt, but you were still alive. "You know," Elijah said after a long pause, "you were a legend in the company. We all heard about what you did that day. Some said you crawled back into that Humvee with a broken rib." "I did," Natalie admitted, "but only because Davis was still in there." She stared down at her hands, lined and calloused. "I didn't save him." "But you tried," he said, voice steady. "That matters." There was a long silence. Then Elijah added, "I posted about what happened today. Not the video, just the story, just what I saw. People need to hear it." Natalie's eyes flickered with something, unease maybe, or the weariness of being made into someone else's message. "I didn't ask for a spotlight," she said. "I know, but maybe the light's not on you, it's shining through you. For all the others like you, who get questioned, mocked, ignored." She didn't answer right away. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, a warmth had started to grow. And for the first time in a long time, Natalie didn't feel invisible. 2 days had passed since Elijah Mason sat in Natalie Rhodes' living room. 2 quiet, almost peaceful days. But peace rarely lasts for those who've seen war. Not when the war follows you home. It started with a knock. Not loud, not aggressive, just insistent. Natalie opened the door to find her neighbor, Mrs. Langston, holding her phone with a nervous expression. "Morning, Natalie." She hesitated, eyes searching Natalie's face. "I thought you should see this." On the screen was a video, grainy footage taken from a cell phone. It showed Natalie in the grocery store parking lot, standing alone, surrounded, yelled at, and then walking away, straight-backed, with that limp that never quite healed. The caption read, "Stolen valor? This woman claims she's a Marine vet, you decide." Natalie didn't speak. Her mouth went dry. The camera had caught only a piece of the story. Not the pain, not the years, not the broken bodies or the funerals or the medals that never made the wounds feel worth it. Just her face, her cane, her silence. Mrs. Langston shifted uncomfortably. I didn't believe it, but some of the neighbors are talking, saying things." Natalie took the phone gently, looked at the comments. No way she was a Marine. Probably just looking for attention. "These stolen valor freaks make me sick." A few defended her. "I served with women tougher than any man. Don't judge by looks." But most were like a slow, steady wave of poison. Natalie handed the phone back without a word. Mrs. Langston touched her arm gently. "If you ever need anything—" "Thank you," Natalie replied, her voice calm, too calm. The door closed softly. Inside, she stood still in her hallway, just for a moment. Then she walked to the cabinet above the fireplace, opened the drawer with her service record, pulled out a folder thick with faded papers, photos, deployment, orders, citations, the flag folded into a perfect triangle from her friend Davis' funeral. She sat on the edge of the couch, staring at it all. Then she cried, not loud, not messy, but deep, from a place that had stayed locked for years. She'd buried so many things, comrades, pride, pain, and now it all felt unearthed by the careless click of a camera and a thoughtless internet post. An hour passed. Another knock. Natalie didn't want to answer, but she did. It was Elijah again. This time he looked different, focused, angry. "Have you seen what they're saying?" he asked. She nodded. "I know the guy who posted the video," he added. "He's one of the bikers. The tall one who called you a fraud. Name's Brett Loomis. I served with his cousin in Afghanistan?" Natalie raised an eyebrow. Small world. Elijah stepped inside, dripping rainwater onto her floor. "He's doing this on purpose, trying to make you a target. But there's something else." He reached into his coat and pulled out a letter, official, sealed. "I talked to my CO. We filed a report on what happened. And, we're backing you, 100%. Signed statements, video testimony. Hell, even Sergeant Mitchell from your old unit made a video." He offered the letter. Natalie didn't take it. "Elijah," she said, voice quiet, "I don't need a crowd of people shouting online. I don't need a campaign. I just wanted groceries." "I know," he said. His voice dropped. "But this isn't about going viral. It's about truth. It's about all the women who served, who get doubted every damn time they wear their stories on their sleeves." She looked at him, tired, grateful, but unsure. He stepped closer, softer now. "You carried us back home. Let us carry you now." Her lip quivered, but she nodded. Maybe, just maybe, this storm could pass. And if it didn't, then at least this time she wouldn't face it alone. The sky had turned a bruised shade of purple, hanging heavy above the mall's parking lot as if it, too, carried the weight of all that had happened. Natalie sat at her kitchen table that night, a chipped mug of chamomile tea cooling between her hands. The warmth was gone, both from the tea and for a moment from the world. She hadn't cried, not in the parking lot, not when those bikers laughed at her, not even when the Marines saluted her with the weight of honor, and years behind their eyes. But now in the quiet of her home, no salutes, no cameras, no uniforms, her hands trembled. Then a knock. 3 short raps, hesitant but sure. She opened the door to find Elijah, clean-shaven, hair combed back, posture straighter than she remembered. In his arms, a worn cardboard box taped at the edges. "I'm not here to talk," he said softly. "I'm here to return what's yours." Natalie stepped aside. No words yet, just a nod. He placed the box gently on her table, brushing dust off the top as if it mattered now. "I found these, in storage. Stuff from deployment. From Fallujah. Thought you might want it back." She lifted the flap. Dog tags, photos, a charred helmet with the Marine insignia half melted, and a field notebook, hers. The cover stiff with dried mud, pages crinkled and stained with time and heat and blood. She froze. "Elijah," she said finally, "I thought this was gone. I thought all of it burned." "I kept it," he said, his voice suddenly thick. "I didn't know why back then. Maybe guilt. Maybe I couldn't let go of what we lost that day." They sat in silence, the kind that only people who've faced death can share without fear. After a long moment, Natalie opened the notebook. Inside, her handwriting, steady even under gunfire. Field reports, sketches, and at the back, a note written on the day of the ambush. "If this is the last thing I ever write, tell them I did it for Davis. Tell them I wasn't afraid. I just wanted them home safe." Her throat tightened. "Elijah," she whispered, unable to finish. "I saw what they did to you. The bikers, the guard, the people who just watched. I stood there and didn't speak up. I failed you." He looked away, jaw clenched. "I owed you more than silence." Natalie reached for the dog tags inside the box. There were 3 sets. Michael Davis, Ethan Cole, Lena Harper, each name whispered from her lips like a prayer. "They were kids," she said, "and I was the one calling the shots." "You got them out of that fire," Elijah said sharply. "You went back when no one else could." "What happened after?" he faltered. "It wasn't your fault." She shook her head slowly. I still see them, in dreams, or when I sit too long in silence. Then came the question she hadn't asked in years. Do you think they'd be proud of what we've become? Elijah was quiet. Then he said, I think they'd be proud of you, and maybe ashamed of me. But I'm trying to fix that. Natalie looked up, searching his eyes. You made the call. You brought them, those Marines. You turned the tide. He gave a broken smile. Yeah, it took me a while, but I remembered what you taught me. We don't leave our own behind. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the wind chimes on the porch. Natalie stood slowly and moved to the shelf above her fireplace. She picked up her bronze star again, turning it over in her hand. I used to think this meant I did something right, she said. But now I think it means I lived. And that means I have to keep carrying their memory, not for pity, not for praise, but for truth. Elijah nodded. I'll carry it too. From now on. She looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the wide-eyed corporal from the convoy anymore. Life had carved lines into his face, but beneath it all was the same young man who had pulled cable lines in the mud, while explosions shook the ground. You've still got a good fight in you, Elijah, she said softly. Just pick the right battles now. He chuckled, wiping a hand over his face. Yes, ma'am. Before he left, he turned and asked, do you think, maybe one day, you'd speak at a base again? There's a new crop of recruits. They need to hear your story. From you. Natalie hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. Maybe one day. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Natalie returned to her table. She opened the notebook again, ran her fingers over the pages, over the names, and then, in a clean spot near the back, she began to write. Tonight the past came back, not to haunt me, but to remind me that I am not alone, that some voices take years to return, but when they do, they still carry honor. The pen moved slow but steady, and outside the wind carried not sorrow but peace. The morning light filtered softly through the worn curtains of Natalie's small kitchen. It was the kind of gentle sunlight that touched everything with warmth, yet carried the weight of quiet reflection. She sat alone at the table, her hands wrapped tightly around a battered field notebook, the one Elijah had found and returned to her just days ago. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the pages, reading the faded ink that held pieces of her past. Letters scrawled in hurried handwriting, notes about battles, lost friends, and the fragile hope that had kept her going. Memories spilled forth, the dust of Fallujah, the burning Humvee, the faces of the brothers she could never forget. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain but from release. The burden she had carried silently for so long was beginning to loosen. Across the room, the letter she had received lay unopened, its heavy cream envelope marked with the unmistakable seal of the United States Marine Corps. Invitation to speak. Her breath caught. The words felt like both a summons and a healing balm. She had avoided public appearances for years. The scars beneath her uniform were invisible to most, but they weighed on her every day. Today, however, she knew this was a moment she couldn't turn away from. Later that afternoon, the auditorium buzzed with a mix of nervous energy and quiet anticipation. Young recruits, fresh faces full of hope and uncertainty, filled the rows. They looked to her with questions hidden behind disciplined eyes. Natalie stepped onto the stage, her dress blues immaculate despite the invisible battles that shaped her. The bronze star medal on her chest gleamed under the harsh lights as a symbol not of vanity, but of sacrifice and survival. She took a deep breath, her voice steady yet full of emotion. I was once like you, she began, her eyes sweeping the room, full of dreams, full of fears, and unsure if I could ever be strong enough. She paused, letting the silence settle like a heavy cloak. War changes everything. It breaks your body, yes, but it also tries to break your spirit. Her gaze fell to the medal resting over her heart. I lost more than a leg in Iraq. I lost brothers, friends who would never see home again. And sometimes I lost myself. A few shoulders shook quietly with sobs. She wasn't alone in that pain. But, she continued, voice growing firmer, there's a strength in remembering why we fight. Not for medals, not for glory, but for the people beside us. for the promise to never leave anyone behind. Her voice cracked, raw and honest. She told them about the convoy ambush, about pulling her comrades from the burning wreckage even as her own body was failing. She spoke of the guilt that followed, guilt no medal could erase. A young recruit raised his hand, his voice trembling. "Ma'am, how did you keep going when everything seemed lost?" Natalie's smile was small, bittersweet. "I held on to the promise we make to each other, that no matter what, we are a family, that we fight not just for ourselves, but for those who can't fight anymore." She lifted her prosthetic leg just slightly, a quiet testament to both loss and resilience. "Some wounds are visible," she said softly. "Others live deep inside us, hidden but just as real." The room was silent, every heart beating in unison with hers. Then slowly, hands began to clap. Not loud, not showy, but steady, respectful. After the speech, recruits came forward, offering folded flags, photos of their loved ones, and words of thanks that felt like balm to her weary soul. Natalie felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. As twilight settled, she stepped outside, the cool air wrapping around her like a familiar embrace. Elijah waited, watching her with quiet pride. "You did good today," he said simply. She nodded, eyes glistening. "For them, for us." Together they stood, two warriors bound by pain, healing, and hope. Sometimes the hardest battles are not fought with weapons, but with the courage to face the world again. And sometimes home isn't a place. It's a promise, a quiet victory. If this story touched your heart, if it made you pause and think about the sacrifices so many carry silently every day, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe, because every voice raised helps. Honor those who gave so much, not just on the battlefield, but in their lives afterward. And if you know a veteran or someone struggling, reach out. A simple word, a small act of kindness, can mean the world. Together, let's keep their stories alive, their courage, their pain, and their hope, so no one ever feels forgotten. Thank you for listening.